It was as much about the fact that we were tackling these obstacles together as a family and incorporating the education into real life. One of the flaws of a traditional public school setting is that it divorces education from real life. It's a life different than what everybody will face once they graduate high school.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Schoolhouse Rocked podcast. We are so excited to have you here. And you can tell it's the same words, but it's a little bit different voice. I am Aby Rinella, and many of your hearts just sank because you didn't hear Yvette's voice. But I want to remind you that, first of all, Happy New Year. It is 2025. And with that, if you remember the big announcement we did at the end of last year, the Schoolhouse Rocked podcast is going to take a little bit of a different format this year. We have 5 hosts that are going to be hosting throughout the year, and we're each going to take 2 weeks with different guests. And we are so excited to have you guys here. So I'm going to kick off the year with my guest, but don't worry, listen in every single week because you will hear Yvette. She's got to pop in here every couple weeks because we know how much we love her. So anyway, welcome back. Happy New Year. We're so excited you're here. I am here with someone that I have been dying to bring on the podcast for a very long time. She's not only one of my homeschool heroes and someone that you can gain so much wisdom from. I've often said she's one of the smartest women I have ever met, but she's also one of my very, very dearest friends. But you're going to have to wait because before I introduce her, I want to thank our first sponsor, and that is Apologia. You know how much we love Apologia here at the Schoolhouse Rock podcast. And if you are looking for a trusted homeschool resource to support your child's education with a strong biblical worldview, which we all are, then Apologia has you. For decades, Apologia has been a go-to source for Christian homeschool curriculum designed to educate, inspire, and build a lifelong love of learning. But that's not all. Apologia knows that homeschooling is not a one-size-fits-all, and that's why they offer a growing catalog of digital resources to fit your family's unique needs. Dive into an online self-paced course, join live classes led by incredible instructors, or stream engaging video lessons anytime, anywhere. They even offer audiobooks, perfect for learning on the go. With Apologia, you're not just choosing a curriculum, you're choosing a partner in your family's educational journey. Explore the full lineup of Apologia homeschool resources today at apologia.com and discover how they can help your family thrive. Apologia, equipping families, inspiring learners, and teaching truth. All right, Audra Talley, my guest I've been dying to have. Welcome to the Schoolhouse Rock podcast.
Thanks, Aby. And that introduction is going to be a tough one to live up to.
I have faith that you can do it. So I invited you on this podcast because not only are you a homeschool mom, but you were a homeschooler yourself.
Yeah.
You are one of those pioneer generations where your parents homeschooled you. And as I've gotten to know you over the years and we've become very dear friends, you, for me, have always been an example of kind of that example, like, this is what I'm trying to raise. Like, Audra is an example of, you hear that homeschool works and we're all just praying that this giant experiment that we're doing works. And I look at you and I'm like, you are a living, breathing example of what homeschooling does academically, spiritually, your family, just the whole bit. And so my hope today is that you can just bring a lot of encouragement to moms as a homeschooled kid on the other side, and also as someone who now is getting ready to launch your own homeschoolers.
Yeah. No, it's kind of odd to be in a position in life where people are looking at me as a prime example of why homeschooling works. But I also firmly believe that homeschooling works, and my life has been, for me, even proof that that is the case.
Right. No pressure, though,
No,
right?
not
That
at all.
looking
Everybody's
to you
watching
as,
me.
as the poster child. But what I am fascinated with about your story is you didn't grow up with what maybe some would say would be everything that a family needs to homeschool perfectly. And that's a little bit what I want you, right? That's what I want you to dive into a little bit today is I just want you to share a little bit about what it was like to be homeschooled when you were a kid, what your parents did that was just so, I mean, really, I'd love to have your parents on because I would love to pick their brains. But you recently did an incredible talk at the Homeschool Idaho Convention, and you kind of went through these different subsets of things that was your experience with homeschooling, these beautiful things. And it was interesting because none of them from the outside would necessarily be beautiful. You had a little bit of a messy, and I mean, you didn't have everything that everybody always thought maybe you would need. And so I just want you to tell us a little bit about what it was like when
Mhm.
you were homeschooled way back when.
Way back when. I like to refer to that time as the dark ages of the homeschooling movement, right? Back,
Yes, right, right.
and the rest of the world knew that as the 1980s. And so back then, there weren't co-ops, there weren't curriculum providers, really. I mean, there was a few providers who had curriculum for private schools that, started allowing homeschoolers to buy their curriculum, but it wasn't really a thing when I was a kid. It was an unusual
Okay.
circumstance for somebody to homeschool.
So what drove your parents first and foremost before you get into it? What drove your parents to homeschool you then?
Well, ultimately, it came down to conviction. They
Mm,
firmly believed that as parents, their primary responsibility was not only to raise us and nurture us in the admonition of the Lord, but that also meant educating us at the same time. And so it was driven by a belief that they shouldn't be abdicating that responsibility to anybody else, and that was a call God put on their lives. And so it was a
awesome.
multifaceted. It was more a matter of conviction, because when I was a kid,
Right,
the public schools weren't kind of off to one side or the other. They were generally,
right,
teaching the 3 R's. They were still educating kids in a fairly, what we would say, reasonable way. But it was definitely the
right.
Lord's call on their life that really pushed them to say, "Hey, this is something God has given us the
Right.
desire and responsibility to do."
Right, so it wasn't that they were running from anything. They weren't running from this big, bad, scary public
No,
schools.
no,
It's that they knew that God put a call on their hearts and their lives,
right,
and they answered that call.
yeah.
And so what were some of, as I've heard your story, what strikes me is it wasn't always easy. And so share, just kinda give us a picture of what did it look like being homeschooled? And what were some of the hardships that your parents faced, and how did they face them?
Well, one of the biggest things that we dealt with was that we were a one income family. There was no
Okay.
way at that time, while we lived really rural, which was one
Right,
component. So there was just us and maybe one or two other families. So just not having community
okay,
was one of the harder parts of it. But two,
right.
just living on that single income, so my mom could take the time to educate us in a manner that they saw fit. So, I mean, my dad was a logger. So, as you can imagine, it wasn't a lot of money coming into the house.
Right.
And just finding the resources to homeschool were some big physical, practical hurdles that they had to overcome. But a lot of creativity went into making what we had work.
Right, and that's what always strikes is I feel like you are probably one of the most well-educated people that I've ever met, and when I hear that you didn't have, all the things that we now as homeschoolers in this generation are being told that we need,
Right.
and you talk a lot about how your parents didn't have a lot of the things that we think we need now to homeschool,
Sure.
things that we're being told that we need, and honestly, things that we are being told that, we need someone else to fund for us, right? Every new curriculum that's out there, every opportunity. So how, without all of those things, did your parents end up giving you such an incredibly solid education?
I would say ultimately it came down to the commitment to find what was needed and do what was needed. And that resources, I mean, homeschool curriculum was an on thing for us. It was unusual. It was nice to have. We were able to get some resources. We did Bob Jones, we did Abeka, we did some basic homeschool curriculum, but we had to share that among all three of us kids. I had a brother and a sister growing up. And there was a lot of adapting to it, but even things like, my dad had a Time Life collection of books, and that became my history. They invested in a set of encyclopedias because, that was Google for us back then. And
Right.
I did a lot of reading in an encyclopedia. I wanted to learn how to spell something. I had to use the dictionary. Um, just whatever books or material we could get our hands on, we used curriculum. We'd go to the library and get what little our library was really small, so there wasn't a lot there, but we would
Oh,
utilize whatever resources we could find there. So it was a lot of cobbling things together. I always kind of joke that my mom was a cobbler, because or eclectic before eclectic was a thing, because she used a little bit of this and a
Right.
little bit of that, and doing art with Play-Doh, and doing
Right.
science out on a hiking trip back into the backcountry and learning about different fish or different habitat. It was just a part of every little thing. Everything that we did had some element of education to it.
So it was really more of a way of life,
Yeah,
education
for sure.
was, as opposed to just
Hmm.
school, right?
Absolutely. And it was them taking the opportunity and drawing our attention to those things that were important for us to know in that day-to-day lived experience.
Right.
Stopping at a historic, site to learn a little bit of history about the area we were traveling through was an awesome thing. And it would lead to conversations about what other events surrounded that particular thing, or cooking. There's chemistry in cooking. It wasn't so much that they had to look in a book as it was, hey, did you know, or hey, let's figure this out, or hey, let's see what else we can do in this situation. So it was a lot of just making everyday moments count.
I love that. And do you feel like you've kind of carried that over into how you homeschool your own kids?
For sure, for sure. It's homeschooling is such a just a natural part of my life that it was kind of somewhat, it felt intuitive to start with when I started homeschooling my kids as they were littler. But like every
Right.
mom, I mean, the modern, right now, homeschooling, there's so many resources available to us that it's easy to get overwhelmed with all the stuff that's out there that is more of a formal curriculum, that is more,
Right.
you can line out here's step A, step B, step C. And it was largely for me an adjustment to go back to the frame of reference of what do we do in our everyday lives? What are those moments that I can look at
Right.
with my kids and go, hey, kiddos, check this out. This puddle is full of little tiny tadpoles. What is it? What are tadpoles, and what are they doing here? And what happens when the puddle dries up? It's all those kinds of day-to-day conversations and just life
Right.
around us that I've really had to, even as a homeschooler, even having had that experience in my life of having to make a conscious choice to engage my kids in that way. So it's somewhat intuitive, but it's also very proactive.
Right, I would agree. So we have a lot of different pressures on us
Hmm.
as homeschoolers
Yeah.
now than your parents probably did then. As I've homeschooled over the years, it seems that the comments have gone from like, "Oh, that's weird. Homeschooling's so weird," And the generation before us, I think they got that, but I've actually never gotten that. I more in our generation, Audra, as we've been homeschooling our kids, it's been more like, "Oh, I wish I could do that. Oh, I wish I could homeschool." Right? "Oh, unfortunately," and then they give the reasons they can't.
Hmm.
And that's kind of the season we're in. And I'm noticing that we're going towards another kind of generational thing that parents are saying. And they're saying something like, "Oh, I want to do that. And now I just need someone to make it possible for me to homeschool." Right. And I think your parents were probably in the generation of, that's different, that's strange, that's weird. And now we've come all the way through to, I want to do it and I want someone to make it happen for me. So where do you feel that your parents were kind of finding the opposition of homeschooling in their generation?
Well, our opposition was very much more external. Modern homeschoolers seem to suffer from a great deal of insecurity, and that's why they're looking outside
Mm.
themselves and outside of God and away from God to answer those questions. But in my parents' generation and what I was raised with was a confidence that God was going to provide. But
Ah,
the opposition was from members of the church, close friends
mm,
who were convinced that we were going to end up, stupid and ill-adjusted and unable to make a living, and be incapable of carrying on a conversation. They even had people telling them, well, your kids should be in public school because they can be a witness there. And
mm.
just the whole typical gamut of, we don't even really know what homeschooling is. It's this weird kind of out there, far strange thing that people were doing then. And,
Right.
there were some mixed reviews and mixed experiences that my parents were having to overcome because there wasn't, 30 years of testing and evidence to back them up.
Right.
So they were really kind of stepping out into the unknown. And the opposition was a lot of people who felt that the unknown was all negative and bad for us as kids. And my parents found that that unknown is not all negative. It was full of positives, and that's where you kind of learn how to rely on God to guide and direct you, is in those unknowns.
Right. So they were really just, I mean, they found their dependence on the Lord. And
Absolutely.
that's the only way to shut out the outside voices that
Hmm.
were telling you all the things, right? It's
Absolutely.
just that, like you said, back to that conviction
Yeah.
that they homeschooled you out of conviction.
Yes.
Do you feel that opposition today in homeschooling? Do you feel like you're getting the same line of questioning?
No, I feel like homeschooling now is kind of, especially post COVID, is on everybody's radar. And now it's not
Right.
the weird. It's
Right.
it's kind of almost normalized, but a lot of what I'm sensing now in the community who's wanting to homeschool is a lot of insecurity. Like I said, just this insecurity,
Mhm.
this I can't homeschool. I'm not smart enough. I can't homeschool because we don't
Right.
have enough money. I can't homeschool because I don't have the patience for it. I can't homeschool because I've got 5 kids, or I have to work a job, and we can't. How do we live on one income? So there's a lot of those inward facing concerns that people have.
Right. We're going to take a quick break and then I want to come back and kind of dissect some of those and to ask based on what you learned from growing up and watching your parents just be so deep rooted in their faith and their conviction, how we can help parents that are listening combat some of those questions. So we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Have you tried CTC Math yet with your child? Here's a testimonial from another happy homeschool mom. Amber said, "I'm absolutely thrilled with CTC Math. It's a rare find that I've used with my children for more than 5 years now. I have 6 children using CTC Math, and each child has found it easy to navigate and very applicable. Thank you so much for all that you are doing in providing quality math lessons for my children." If you're looking for a great online math program, visit ctcmath.com. That's ctcmath.com.
There has never been an easy time in history to homeschool. And I think the reason is it's never easy to answer the call that God has given us. And I think that there's probably a design to that because if it's easy, we don't have to rely on the Lord, right? When things are hard, when there's opposition from the world, when we feel completely inadequate, that's when we have nowhere to go but to the Lord. And then go back to that conviction, go back to that, why am I homeschooling? Why am I doing this? And your parents always fascinate me. And I'm going to have you share a little bit just about, I mean, they faced some pretty serious challenges when they were educating you guys. But you were discussing, there's the same thread, I think, of insecurity going through the generations, this idea of, I can't do it. And back then, it was because the outside world was telling you can't do it, right? And now you've said that it seems like it's coming more from inside of us. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough patience. I don't have enough education. What about socialization? All those things. And so kind of help us dissect those questions that we battle, that insecurity, as you call it, from inside of us. How would we use what the generation before us used to conquer the things that we're facing now?
Well, the internal insecurity, I think, comes from a place where we're looking to ourselves for
Mm,
for affirmation. We're looking internally for support. We're looking the wrong direction. So I think that the biggest thing that this generation needs to do is get their eyes off of the I can'ts and hows
right.
back onto God, who is the I can and I will
Yes.
and I'm able. And that reliance needs to focus back on Him. And then I think we also need to get to a place where we separate the vision of what we think homeschooling is supposed to be
Mm,
from what homeschooling is really all about, what it is meant to be, what God has made it to be. And I think a lot of times we get rose-colored glasses on, and homeschooling is all the fun curriculum, and it's all the the accoutrements and all the field trips and all the experiences. And really, homeschooling, just dissected down, is living our lives for Christ with an eye toward education. It's not education with an eye towards God. It is living for God with an eye towards education.
I absolutely love that. God first,
God
right?
first
God
in everything.
first, and then education. I love that. And it reminds me of something that you were sharing a while back about just these beautiful ordinary days
Mm-hmm.
and the beautiful hard days, and how I like how you said, we have this vision of what homeschooling is supposed to look like. And we always share, oh, the great, oh my goodness, this amazing Charlotte Mason, or this amazing classical, or these amazing books we're reading. And all of that's really important. But this is what has really always struck me with you as one of the smartest women, one of the most well spoken. I mean, you're like the epitome of success. Like, you're the goal of what I hope I can succeed with in my kids. And yet, when I asked you all of the, like, how did your parents do it? This is the answers you gave me. We had really ordinary days. We
Mm-hmm.
had really hard days. It wasn't always incredible. I mean, there really wasn't. I think it was incredible, but you're like, it really wasn't this picture book of homeschooling. I mean, you had gaps in your
Mm-hmm.
education. There was a year there where you were kind of left to figure some things out on your own.
Yeah.
So share a little bit about the hard and the challenging and even the ordinary.
Well, I would say some of the hard was just that nothing in life is ever constant. Life is always changing. It's going to throw stuff at you. For our family, that included a sister who had heart issues, and so there were lots of trips on the road where we'd be driving because we were rural. So the nearest doctor, pediatrician who had any experience with dealing with her condition was 3 hours away. And when you're going into town for a couple times a month for that can throw your schedule off. I can We used to do school in the car on those trips. We would stop at historic sites alongside the road or little museums anytime we had to go to an appointment for her.
And so that I want to kind of park there, because
Okay.
for me and this generation, I think if I would feel like in my weakness, if I were to experience that, I'd immediately be like, I got to get my kids back. I mean, I can't do this. Obviously, now this is the precedent. We have this child with these health issues, so therefore we can't homeschool. And I'm fascinated because when I look at how your parents did it, they realize, like, this is part of the homeschool experience. Like, this is part of it. This is what our family is going through with the Lord. So therefore, this is the academic. This is the education, right?
Absolutely. And again, that comes back to homeschooling is part of the family dynamic. And the reality is that public school, a traditional, even private school, a traditional school setting with a medically complicated kid, just practically speaking, would not have worked. And that's one of the beautiful things
Right.
about homeschooling, is that it is infinitely adaptable. And you can do it anywhere. You can do it anytime. You can do it in 10-minute increments. You can do it for an hour long. You can do it for an afternoon. You can do it on a Sunday or a Saturday evening, or if you need to, you do it during the summer. I mean, I remember some seasons we went through the school year and did not get
Right.
nearly as much done as we needed to get done for that year. And so we played around with it during the summer and kind of got caught up on that. But it was as much about the fact that we were tackling these obstacles together as a family and
Right.
incorporating the education into real life. I know my dad firmly believed that one of the flaws of a traditional public school setting is that it divorces education from real life. And it's a
Mm.
life different than what everybody will face once they graduate high school. And one of the beauties of homeschooling is that you get real life alongside that education, running parallel tracks. They aren't separate things. They become intertwined
Right.
and just part of everyday life.
That's what strikes me, as I've learned from you, is just that marriage between family and life, and that is the education, right? And
Mhm.
so what would you think if we were to talk to your dad, some of those things that the traditional education divorces itself from real life? I mean, the one thing that I think is social. We all think, that you're best socialized in a public school setting, but that is absolutely
No.
nothing like real life
No.
socialization. So I know you live very rurally and you guys didn't have these big giant, I mean, you run right now currently a huge homeschool co-op, but that is absolutely nothing what it looked like for you as a kid, right?
Right.
And so, but ultimately, I would think that your socialization as a kid probably looked very much more like real life socialization than the kids sitting their seats in the public school. So talk a little bit about the socialization thing based on kind of your upbringing.
Well, for sure, the socialization was not, again, a formal part of education. It never really is, but
Right.
it's what happens along the way. So my parents,
Right.
wherever they went, we went. And so the conversations that they were engaged in with the community, whether it was as part of a community, as a city nonprofit organization in support of the community, whether it was those meetings, whether it was, helping my dad interface with people as we built a local medical clinic, or at church on a Sunday as a family, we did everything together. Going to the doctor's office for my sister, we were in all those appointments. So we got to engage with doctors and surgeons and a variety of people, even on kind of what would have otherwise been a tough thing. My parents started a
Right.
4-H group so that we could participate in 4-H, which took us, out of town into countywide competitions and settings, to state competitions and settings. We would go to we used to go to a Christian workers conference that was hosted in Spokane. And again, anything that my parents were engaged in, we were part of the conversation. We were part of the engagement, even from being itty bitty, tiny little kiddos. I always remember just always being present in their lives on an ongoing basis, and that those interactions really fueled and gave me information from sources that weren't just a book.
Yeah, and I see that so much in you as an adult because I've seen you in so many settings and so many things thrown at you like, "Hey, can you go talk to this legislator? Hey, can you go do this interview with this news team?" And it's like you have a level of comfort in those settings, and I look back and I'm like, "You know what? There are no kids sitting in seats in the four walls that have as a child like you were like you said, doctors, I mean, community members, you were with your parents interacting. That's real socialization. And that has done you a great good into your
Yeah,
adult life where most kids, they graduate, they turn 18, and they don't have a clue how to talk to an adult or in a business
for
setting
sure.
or in honestly any other setting other than raising their hand and waiting to be called on. And that's their socialization
Hmm.
and being able to, interact with their peers 15 minutes at select intervals during the
Right.
day. And so I love it and I see it in your adulthood. It took me years to be comfortable in those settings because I was a traditional public school kid and my socialization was just very much limited to those four walls.
Yeah, it's a huge part of one other thing that makes homeschooling so attractive is that you get to do life and conversation in
Yes.
community with your kids. It's an amazing experience.
Right, which we also then need to fast forward to today, and I think a lot of homeschoolers today are trying to recreate the school into their home, and they're not realizing they're saying, "Oh, I need to find somewhere for my kids to go for this doctor's appointment," or "I have a meeting, so, the kids need to be," but we don't. That's the point of homeschool is that it is life, and
Hmm.
so we need to not recreate the public school into our homes, but
Exactly.
instead look to that generation that went before us and it was God first, family, life, and then that's what educated you, right? Like
Yeah,
those were your education. And that's not to say that your parents didn't read books to you and have books thrown at you. I mean, you very much had an academic
for
education
sure.
as well, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there were the classic, you must pass X number, years of math, you must have some history, you must have some geography, all the basics, but
Right.
those have no meaning outside the context of life.
Yes,
Why does
thank
it
you.
why does it matter, when the Civil War happened, if I can't put it in the context of what that impact has had on our world around us and what we're dealing with today or what we've dealt with in the past, that moment in time means nothing without the rest of the components in the life we're living right now. And that's true of every academic subject that you can imagine is that in a vacuum, it has no we can't apply math in a vacuum. We have to have opportunity
Right.
to utilize it, whether it's a budget or whether it's calculating miles per gallon in your car and learning some fundamentals there. That the ability to multiply means nothing unless you're able to use it in real life. And homeschooling, again, allows for those academic components to come to fruition and coalesce in a real life setting.
Oh, for sure. And I think that's why we see so many of the generation now, they don't have a love of learning.
Mm-hmm.
They don't like school. They're not interested. Check it off the box and move on. And it's because, like you said, they don't have that marriage between education and life. They don't see a purpose to it, right?
Yeah. I would.
And the goal is that we're creating lifelong learners. That's what we want to do.
Yeah. And I can't, I mean, there might be days where I don't learn something new, but it's definitely a part of my personality to take ideas or to read for content, read for information. And some of it's kind of obscure stuff, but cumulatively, even today, I try to find opportunities to learn new stuff in, again, everyday life. Sometimes I'll get to read a book about a particular topic, but some of it is, just in conversation with a neighbor, learning about their job. I'm going to learn something new by just engaging in that conversation. So learning is definitely not done, between the hours of 8 a.m. and 3 p.m. Monday through Friday for 12 years. It is every day, all day for the rest of your life.
I love that. And I cannot wait to carry on this conversation, but we have to wrap it up for this week. And I just want to remind everybody that we're in 2026, so the format's going to look a little different. So we are, again, doing a 30-minute episode each week. So you are going to come back here next week and you're going to find Audra and myself, and we're going to carry on this conversation. We're going to dive a little bit into what Audra learned about freedom and some of the challenges that her parents' generation faced, and what our generation can learn from that and do about that. So if you go to, and I want you to go to schoolhouserocked.com, you can find the movie. It is free. You can watch Schoolhouse Rocked, the Homeschool Revolution there. You can find all of our past podcasts. We have years and years and years of back podcasts that you can listen to there. You can listen to this podcast on any place that you listen to podcasts. Just make sure you go there, sign up for the newsletter, and you'll get to find out what's coming up. You can find me, Aby Rinella, at Aby Rinella on any social media, calledtothetop.com, wherever you can find me. And again, if you miss Yvette, and we know you do, please just send a little email over to the info@schoolhouserocked.com. Go to the website, contact them there, and let her know that you love her and you cannot wait to hear from her again in a couple weeks. So anyway, meet me back here next week. We're going to continue this conversation with Audra and have an awesome week.
What can poison dart frogs, monarch butterflies, and jellyfish teach us about God's truth and love? It's time to return nature study to its rightful place as theology, the study of God. That's exactly what we do on Nat Theo, Nature Lessons Rooted in the Bible, a podcast for kids which recently ranked number 4 for education for children in the USA. I'm Erin Lynham, host of Nat Theo and a certified master naturalist, Bible teacher, author, and educator. Join thousands of families listening to Nat Theo for their science and Bible lessons. Listen today on your favorite podcast platform or at erinlynham.com. That's ERYNLYNUM.com. Reconnect the dots between creation and creator as your children learn real, fun science from a biblical worldview.
You can imagine being a homeschool mom, quietly homeschooling over your kitchen table and hear vehicles coming up your road. One of the most pivotal events in Idaho homeschool history happened in the early 80s when a district superintendent decided he did not like how a homeschool family in his school district was homeschooling their kids and really wanted to treat their homeschool setting as if it were a public school. Eventually, they just couldn't meet all the requirements. And it came to a head when he put his foot down and said, you're sending your kids to public school or you're not schooling. And the parents said, we can't because we feel like God has called us to homeschool our kids. And he sent the sheriff out to their homes and arrested the parents and put their children in foster care.